No, I'm going to explain to you real quick.
Continue walking.
But don't be rolling out. There's a reason for it.
So I did get that right. Yeah, you got it right.
I'm kind of curious as to how you got into crypto.
Yeah, I'm happy to give my background. So I'm an attorney, and I did 1 year doing commercial litigation at Gordon and Reese, and I thought that it was what I wanted to do with my career, but I pretty quickly realized that I just didn't have sort of the partially regulatory, but also just innovative side that I was looking for to really kind of keep up with current events. And so I was lucky enough to, as a second year attorney, join a company called $X that was a wholesale currency exchange company. And it really exposed me to all of the financial regulatory questions and issues that the cryptocurrency space also handles. And so once I got to be familiar with that space and started to learn about Bitcoin, I just kind of went down the rabbit hole and realized that this was where I wanted to spend my time and energy.
So is it your own firm, or do you work for a larger firm? What's your background in terms of legal?
Yeah, so Anderson Kill is a larger firm, mainly based on the East Coast, but and mainly focusing more on litigation and insurance, actually. But they've been working for many years to build out a cryptocurrency practice. I lead that practice with two other attorneys, and we've really started to represent most of the industry in varying, commercial, corporate, and regulatory issues that come up.
Absolutely know who you are. Kind of knew the answer before I asked it, but I just want the audience to be able to kind of get the background here. I mean, it's a new field. I know that I say a new field, but Bitcoin's 12 years old. But I can remember 11 years ago, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 7 years ago, mining Bitcoin. BitNile, the company that I'm the founder of, is one of the largest miners now. We're not the largest by far, but we're definitely, when it comes to mine Bitcoin, we're definitely growing pretty dramatically. We had a couple stops and starts. We've had some, it's not been a straight line, if you know what I'm saying.
That's how the crypto space and startup world work lately.
Never has been. I want to, if it's okay with you, because obviously this is taped, so people will see this later. Sure. And I know you do a lot of work with Coinbase and some of the other platforms, but I think people are thoroughly confused, and I wondered if you could talk about the ETF concept, or if you had any comment about there being an actual Bitcoin ETF, cash, versus a futures.
Right. And
if not, I understand, but I just kind of want to get your take on it.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I mean, I don't know if it's helpful to go into sort of the background of crypto regulation first,
sure.
Because it sort of builds off of it. But pretty much in the US, for many years when I was an attorney in the space, I think the industry was kind of fighting against this idea of cryptocurrency as the wild, wild west, when in actuality, it's very heavily regulated on the state and federal level. And probably the most, I guess I'd say, hostile regulator in the space is the SEC. And I think it's gotten more so over time as there was the ICO phase in 2017 and various crypto companies launching in this space, launching tokens really as a way to raise capital and fundraise using the ICO platform rather than going the traditional IPO route through the SEC. And so my personal feeling is just that the SEC is slowly moving to continue to heavily regulate and enforce in this area. And so with spot or futures ETFs, the idea is that in many other countries, Canada is a good example, both spot and future ETFs have been approved. And in the US, the SEC has approved futures Bitcoin ETFs, which means that you can invest on things that are really based on the underlying asset, but not the underlying asset itself. They continue to not approve Bitcoin spot ETFs. And there is a lot of confusion. I don't have a good answer for it. Honestly, the idea that, the SEC has continued to say that it's based on those markets being susceptible to market manipulation. But most of the ways in which pricing mechanics work for futures products are the same as spot. And so it's left a lot of projects and attorneys in the space kind of scratching their head, and even writing letters to the SEC saying this just doesn't make sense. And so today we still don't have, the spot Bitcoin ETF in the U.S.
Yeah, I get a sense that I know that the funny part is that Gary Gensler, Secretary Gensler, Chairman Gensler, he's taught about blockchain, but it makes no sense to me. They've deemed it not a security, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, did they officially say that about Ethereum, or did they say that about Bitcoin in a way where we just heard that? Because I've heard them say it's not a security, but is it not a security to them?
The SEC is interesting because they really have been regulating through enforcement and then providing guidance, occasionally official guidance, but also just through these sort of speeches that don't count as official guidance or law. And so I'd say that the Ethereum ETH not being a security is really based more on comments we've heard over the past years, and there's arguments to be made that it could arguably still be that. But I think it's the Ethereum network has expanded in such a way, and the SEC has said that a cryptocurrency can start out as a security and morph into something different when it becomes decentralized enough. And so that would, probably be the argument current today about ETH, is that it's been around and it would still function without that centralized, oversight or organization. But, I would say that I also think there's a lot of political plays in action in the U.S. Gary Gensler did teach cryptocurrency at various, colleges, law courses. And when he joined the SEC, I was pretty cautiously optimistic about how he would choose to regulate the space. But what I'm seeing is sort of this bigger, maybe bigger motive behind the scenes of cryptocurrency sort of being plugged into the banks and CBDCs and becoming more of something that the government can control. And so I think a lot of the climate coming from the SEC is sort of trying to support that initiative or that sort of stance on the crypto space.
It seems like to me, I guess I'm jumping to conclusion because I'm pretty biased, but it seems like you're making a case for Bitcoin.
Yes, I am, definitely.
Yeah, okay. Because I was going to say, I don't think they can put the get Bitcoin genie back in the bottle.
They can't, and I think they'd like to. I think that the idea of something being able to operate without government, bank, monetary policy being able to control it is something that's very threatening to regulators, and especially the U.S. that has had sort of been the leader of the global market.
Haley, that's the exact. I apologize. I don't normally interrupt guests, and I didn't mean to do that. I apologize, but
no problem.
But like your point, what you were saying was they'd like to regulate it, or you think they'd want to get control of how it's monitored or handled. But isn't that exactly the point of Bitcoin? Isn't that exactly going to feed into the frenzy? Like that they have to walk this fine line, but because they're going to be emboldening the whole world that believes that decentralized finance makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I think the harder that they try to fight against innovation and decentralization of currency, it's an advertisement for Bitcoin.
Wow. Haley, I don't like to be the guy who asks those sort of preformed questions, but I'm going to ask it because I have to. But what are your thoughts on the best case scenarios for regulation of crypto in the U.S. and globally? What would be the ultimate outcome for you as a lawyer?
So it's funny. I guess that question has two levels for me because I'm a holder of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And I'm a lawyer in this space. From being a lawyer in the space, the difficulty arises in that many of the regulators are using old regulation and trying to apply it to cryptocurrency, which is something sort of something we've never seen before. And so when a regulator is trying to discuss cryptocurrency as money or as a security and just putting it in old law, there's a lot of gray area for lawyers in the space trying to help. All of our clients are coming to Anderson Kill looking to do things the right way. And it's very difficult when there's not clarity in the regulation. So for most businesses and legal practices in the United States, I would say more clarity and potentially regulators being a little bit more innovative with their rules and regulations as well, not just trying to rely on old regulations that were created before this idea of crypto even existed. But from a Bitcoin holder's perspective, the ideal is that that government and regulators would really understand the importance of financial privacy and not view privacy the same as sort of like secrecy or having something to hide. But in other areas of our day-to-day life, I think people really understand the need for less surveillance. And that at its core, I think, has a lot to do with Bitcoin, because the idea that the government and banks just get to see everything we do with our day-to-day lives and really surveil our financial transactions is a little odd, to be honest, that everyone's really okay with that.
This is actually where I think a U.S. digital fiat currency that's all digital, to me, runs amok, and that is the idea that you're going to say to the government, okay, everything I have now is now digital. There is no like paper fiat. Yep. And they can see and track everything on the blockchain you ever do with your own fiat. Right. And they can print more of it that way. It is well, if you take it to its extreme, right? You go, well, the Chinese banned Bitcoin because they issued their own crypto, but now they know everything their citizens spend money on. They know everywhere they go. You could go down a rabbit hole that's pretty bad there.
I mean, I think that there should be a better understanding that wanting privacy and wanting more personal control over your finances does not necessarily mean you are trying to launder money or do something illicit. I mean, that's just not the way we should think about it. And when you go back to even like internet law and encryption, there's a lot to be said for encrypting and privacy, even more so than Bitcoin offers. And so, yeah, if you go down this road of centrally issued digital currency, it's going to increase the ability of banks and the government to surveil what you're doing.
Yeah, I was going to say the idea that Bitcoin. I didn't lose my train of thought, but I would say to you the privacy part of it is a really interesting scenario, because you see that they were able to track money hacked in Bitcoin and do this big recovery recently. And yet the government and tons of government officials and politicians say, look what they're using Bitcoin for. I mean, Charlie Munger, it's a haven for criminals. Yeah. The fiat that Charlie Munger makes is a haven for criminals. I mean, there are millions and millions of crimes have been committed trying to get U.S. dollars. It makes absolutely no sense to me that people make that argument. Like, look what they're using crypto for. Actually, yeah, they're catching the people that take the crypto. They know the wallet they sent it to, and they can track where it's going, and they work backwards.
That's a good point. I mean, I think, what I've seen since working in this space since like 2013 is that almost every year there's a new fear narrative around cryptocurrency. And It's like the government can't really hang their hat on anything, right? Because it's too private and anonymous. No, it's not. Oh, well, then it's bad for the environment. It's not good with for energy efficiency. Sure. I mean, every year there's sort of a different argument. And in reality, what the government wants is control over monetary policy. Like you said, printing as much money as they want. Elizabeth Warren has been one of the biggest sort of critics of Bitcoin in this space, and then blames inflation on other things besides the printing of money that we've been doing for the last year or two. Sometimes the arguments in this space don't really add up.
I didn't think about what you just said until recently. That's a really good point. I don't want to lose that point. It is every year there's a new narrative of why it's bad. Yeah. And the narrative gets pushed down. Because I know, like for us, we're thinking about, we use nuclear power, but we're thinking about moving some hydro online. It's very efficient, very cheap, very green. We bought the new green miners, which have a carbon credit with Bitmain. And obviously every year they try to make a new, they pay no attention to the inefficiencies of all the data centers out there and the power they use, but they want to claim that Bitcoin mining is very. It's an interesting thought. I didn't think about that. Every couple years, they do come up with kind of a new negative.
Because enough counter arguments have been made. They can't keep. I mean, I started my career at Silvergate Bank in 2013. It's a major banking partner to cryptocurrency companies. And when I joined as legal advisor there to help them figure out how to bank the large exchanges in this space, I mean, regulators and banks were really worried about the money laundering concerns. Then Chainalysis and some of these blockchain monitoring companies come out with reports of, well, the US dollar is still the predominant use for money laundering. So that's an insane thing to point to, because people can go up to an ATM machine, put a bunch of dollar bills in there, and it goes straight to their bank account. So yeah, I think the arguments against it have had to evolve and sort of think on the toes of it. But if you think about it, what's frustrating is at its core, I think the United States has up until now arguably done a really good job at promoting innovation and allowing industries that are working to make new technology feel supported and wanting those jobs and those companies to stay here in the US. And so to me, it's so counterintuitive that all of a sudden, when we're talking about money, obviously money is very powerful, but all we're talking about doing at its very simplest form is banks all over the world, even more so outside of the US, don't run very efficiently. They're closed on weekends and holidays. There's 3 to 5 business days for wires. There's large fees for cross-border remittance. Why wouldn't you be, as a country, interested in maintaining the thought leaders in that industry and being viewed more as a partner in that? So
they are crypto. I mean, they're disrupting the system. I mean, effectively, what Western Union used to take a while to do and was not always a secured situation and very expensive on a low dollar amount, all the delivery of that to, from the U.S. to Mexico, from the U.S. to Canada, it's kind of being squished down. I get it. It's really Silvergate. Wow, that company's really innovated for sure. We're with Signature, but I know that Silvergate has been really kind of a dominant player in the space.
Yeah. I just read something last week that they acquired the intellectual property rights to the Facebook's Libra DM stablecoin, which was sort of a failed project because regulators came down so hard on Facebook for various things they've done over the last decade. But it'll be interesting to see what Silvergate Bank and just other banks in general start to do with not centralized digital assets, but stable coins and that sort of thing, to just use those rails to, improve upon the movement of money.
Well, I didn't know that they acquired the rights to Libra.
I saw the headlines about it and I clicked on it, just interested who it was. And then I saw Silvergate's name and I think I tweeted wasn't expecting to see Silvergate as the purchaser. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's you heard it here first. I didn't know that, and obviously you didn't hear it her first because she found it on Twitter, but you heard it from here first on this. I don't know. That probably doesn't make any sense. Wow, I didn't think it. Wow, I wonder why they acquired it. That's interesting. That really was a failed project. It's a shame too, because every time Facebook has tried to innovate, they've been there. So Facebook's really in a conundrum here because they really are a company that acquires technology. They never really, other than the original Facebook, nothing else they built is they didn't acquire really, except onto Facebook. And then, so now their whole core model has been they acquired WhatsApp, they acquired Instagram. And then when they try to make Libra, they get shut down pretty hard.
Yeah. I think part of it was, not to go on a tangent, but, stable coins, I think, have a lot of potential. And the idea of it is that the value is tied to an asset or basket of assets to give the stable coin price stability. So it's not as volatile as something like Bitcoin. But what Facebook did that I think they didn't hire the right law firm, because I would have told them that, they were trying to make the stablecoin backed by a basket of assets that included other countries' currency. And they were going to choose the percentage of which the dollar was part of that different other, countries' currencies. And I think the US government was really able to quickly look at that and say, that's really plain monetary policy. Like, we want to keep the value of the dollar here in the United States. And if you're adding a basket of assets, including other countries' currency, you're starting to play with that too much. They also have a ton of reputational baggage from the data privacy and everything else that has happened. So I think, they have an uphill battle.
I can't get my arms around stablecoin. Doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, why is a stablecoin any different than a U.S. dollar then? A U.S. denominated cryptocurrency? Why would a stablecoin, like in theory, the Federal Reserve could issue their own stablecoin and say $1 is $1, right?
Yeah, I think that's what CBDCs will be if the bank does that. I mean, it will be the idea of the government digitizing the dollar is actually a little silly, because we're pretty digital right now, right? I mean, we're using credit cards, debit cards, Venmo, different ways.
And I can Zelle you right now for free.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a transaction cost. Is there for Zelle?
I can't speak. I've never used Zelle, actually. I can't speak to that. But
I Zelle people all the time. I Zelle people. That's really effectively digital money. I do get the point about the credit cards, though, and some of the transaction fees involved in digital transfer. There, I actually just bought. We own 19.9% of Earnity, and they charged me a 2% fee to buy Bitcoin. And I bought some last night because it was like in the 36,000 range.
I did too. High five.
There you go. High five. Fist bump. There you go. And I thought to myself, okay, I don't mind paying $10 because I didn't buy a lot of it. It was like $500, and I keep averaging in all the time. I don't know. It was actually a stupid transaction, but I really wanted to use my own platform. It was the first time I had bought something on a platform we invested in.
Yep.
And everything in that space is getting squeezed. So I can't imagine that the banks don't lobby to be part of what's taking place there. I mean, could you almost imagine that on my Chase app, where I have my brokerage account, I have my checking account, my credit cards, can't you imagine that I also have my Bitcoin listed there?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a matter of time. I mean, when I was working at Coinbase, the chief legal officer at the time was Brian Brooks, who then moved to the Office of Comptroller of Currency. And when he was there, he was really putting out all the guidance about national bank charters being able to custody crypto or deal with stable coins. I think I give it 3 to 5 years before what you're saying, like that you can open up a Bank of America and see it all right there.
So where in California are you?
So right now I'm in Santa Barbara. I'm kind of in between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles.
That's terrible. I don't know how you deal with Santa Barbara. Just kidding.
It's pretty nice.
No, I grew up in the Orange County area, lived in Newport, Huntington, went to Huntington, school in Huntington at Edison, and spent some time in Santa Barbara. I love it there. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Are you living there, or is that where your office is, or?
I'm living here, and I'm planning to expand Anderson Kill's presence into Los Angeles and open an office there.
Nice. And they're primarily East Coast based?
Yeah, mainly DC and New York.
In your mind, what can Bitcoin be used for that allows you to sort of expand its usage? Or do you see it as just a store of value and not really usable in any other borrowing platforms, lending platforms?
No, I mean, I think it can certainly do many of the things you were just mentioning, and but the SEC has to get okay. I mean, in the insurance realm, my background's not insurance, so I can't actually speak to sort of the different issues that would arise by trying to use Bitcoin to sort of back insurance issuance. But when it comes to the various like lending protocols, I mean, there really shouldn't, in my perspective, there shouldn't be a reason why crypto can't be collateral for a car loan or a mortgage or or even just lending out. And that's what's been interesting over the last few months, is seeing all these different cryptocurrency companies really running head to head with the SEC. I mean, Coinbase reported that the SEC said if you launch a crypto lending product, we'll sue you. They just settled with BlockFi about a crypto lending type yield product. So part of the potential for cryptocurrencies use in the U.S. currently is being stifled by regulation.
Why do they want to sue Coinbase though? Why? And I saw people recommend that they challenge that with the SEC. But why do they want to sue them over it? Why not allow Coinbase just to lend money on that?
I mean, I can't answer that, but I mean, I think you and I had spoken earlier a little bit about this idea that regulators are, especially the SEC is here to do investor protection. So that's something they can always point to and say, well, this is just prone to manipulation, or there's not enough known about it, or it's too volatile, and try to say that they're protecting investors. But if you go and talk to the industry, usually these are products that people really, really want. I think what happened with Coinbase, from what I could tell, just like public information wise, it seemed like there were, the SEC and other regulators are constantly saying, oh, we have a FinHub, or we have this open door policy, come talk to us. And sometimes I would probably advise clients not to do that, because it gives you're hoping for a good result, but if you don't get it can turn into a situation like this. So from what I could tell, just from Coinbase and the SEC's sort of statements on it, it's like Coinbase came to kind of have a frank conversation with the SEC. The SEC couldn't really point to why they couldn't do it, but said that they thought it would be a security offering. And Coinbase said, well, we're going to launch it. And they said, if you do, we'll sue you. So, I mean, at the end of the day, in a lot of ways, regulators have that trump card. Companies can certainly take make a risk decision and a business decision to go with it. Ripple is in litigation right now with the SEC about whether XRP was a security. So companies can certainly do that, but for a lot of companies in the space, especially ones smaller than Coinbase, doing that costs a lot of money and time and legal fees, and it's not something most companies want to do.
You do bring up an important point, and that is, I was going to transition to Ripple. They have head-on fought the SEC in a really public forum, and actually won some important rulings from judges who allowed them to subpoena records and look at kind of what the SEC's thinking at the time, why they said Bitcoin wasn't a security, Ethereum wasn't a security, but Ripple is a security, why they were sued right out of the way when Trump was leaving. What are your thoughts around the Ripple case?
So I agree with you. I think they've actually been doing a pretty good job putting up a fight. And I think that the reason I'm interested in where it goes is that I talked earlier about the space really benefiting from some clarity. And if the SEC is having to show their cards any more than they have in the past, I think that'll be an overall positive thing, sort of regardless of the outcome, because then at least there's some precedent and things people can point to when trying to understand token projects. But, I think what we're seeing is that it's really, it's clearly, if something's a security or not is a very fact intensive discussion. And I've seen some records from the Ripple litigation of even law firms sending emails and opinions about Ripple. And so it goes to show that, you can have all the law firms in the world giving their opinions, but it really is sort of such a fact intensive analysis, and it's so new, applying tokens to this old SEC regulation and law, that I think the outcome's kind of up for debate, because it's sort of like one person's opinion against another regulators.
You only have 8 months before the election, the midterm elections, and I never want to be that guy who says, oh, there's no chance Biden's team, the Democratic side doesn't suffer some losses here. But do you have a sense of whether the Republicans or Democrats which one's really better in your mind for Bitcoin and crypto regulation?
I try to I focus more on politics than, more on the regulations than the actual sort of like political parties at play. But I mean, I think that Republicans generally have a sense of sort of staying out of finance and sort of staying out of business a little, staying out of people's business a little bit. So I think that some of the hostility we're seeing in the industry might have become worse when Biden took over. But what's interesting is a lot of these roles don't change. And at the end of the day, there are rules that these regulators are supposed to be pointing to that justify their approach of the industry. So it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, I always thought it was very interesting when Trump was in office. I mean, he had that day where he sort of went on this Twitter rant about hating Bitcoin. And now Melania Trump has these NFTs. And, it's just like a very interesting space to sort of, sometimes maybe personal opinion doesn't actually make that much of an impact on what the space looks like.
Yeah, I have the analogy there, and that is Roger Goodell, who was the chairman of or head of the president of the NFL, whatever, CEO of the NFL, was completely against these online apps for betting, right? Just a few years ago, we're completely against it. We don't think it's a smart idea. And here we are 3 years or 4 years later, and now they're sponsoring stadiums, and they're in the broadcast, and they're all over the stadiums. So you'd think to yourself, Bernie Sanders suddenly shows up and says, I love Bitcoin. You go, what? But you do see people make that shift when they realize the technology, when they get over the rhetoric of it, and they go, okay, I kind of get it. I think that you do. I think the best example of this, and I want to get your opinion, and I'm a big admirer of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. People who know me know that Warren Buffett was an important person in my life when I was younger and still is, in terms of his teachings and really how I got in the business. But when I listen to Charlie Munger say the Chinese have got it right and it's rat poisoning, and he's willing to just say this from a position of being a billionaire and just effectively discounting what it's doing for foreign governments, like what it's doing for foreign countries like El Salvador, where these guys are getting deflated out, their currencies are getting annihilated.
Yeah.
I wonder your commentary on why it's so old school versus young school. And I apologize about going on with the question, but it reminds me of like even how stupid I was when I said to myself, a cell phone, what are you talking about? I'm not going to pay that much for a cell phone, put it in my car when I can just stop and use a payphone.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like an ignoramus kind of thing to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's going back to that whole you can't, teach old dogs new tricks. I mean, I think people's life experience does dictate what they see value in. And so if you've always been able to trust your government, the banks, if you have always been able to access the traditional financial system, maybe you kind of think this is weird internet money. But if you kind of take a step back and look at the global experience with finance, the number of people that are unbanked and get access to financial markets because they have a smartphone and can now use Bitcoin. You brought up El Salvador, the first country that ever made Bitcoin legal tender. And I think even the pushback they're getting there in El Salvador is sort of that lack of understanding. And I also think that people sometimes say things before they truly believe it themselves. Sometimes I think even Gary Gensler and things I'm hearing people say, I'm like, I don't even know if that's truly that person. When they go to bed at night and they're laying in bed, if they are really like believe what they just said, it might be part of a bigger political like scheme in place.
When we started Bitcoin mining, we experienced banks shutting us down. And that's what the big deal with Silvergate is that we were shut down by Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase Bank. I think almost
yeah.
every institution we went to found out we were Bitcoin mined, they shut us down. Farmers and merchants.
Yeah.
And they just did it universally. We're shutting all your accounts down. I remember U.S. Bank shutting us down, and they shut down my wife's Girl Scout account. And I'm like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Yeah. And they use this universal 9/11 money laundering. Like everything's money laundering. Like the universally stupid comment, we're trying to avoid money laundering. Everyone's a money launderer. Even the Girl Scouts are money launderers. I wondered if you think that that's changing now that Silvergate and Signature Bank are really banking people in the Bitcoin space. Is that kind of going away a little bit? Or do you think that the bigger banks are still like, you're related to Bitcoin, we can't touch you?
I think it is slightly going away. I mean, I remember years ago when like individual users would have their accounts shut down just for sending $200 to Gemini or Coinbase, like a bank would shut you down even just as a user of cryptocurrency wanting to buy some. And I think we are seeing a lot less of that now. I think the general tone that I'm seeing is almost more of a convergence between crypto and banking. The real issue, and I think the real smart move that, some of these earlier banks like Silvergate, Signature, Metropolitan, it's not that any perceived increased inherent risk of Bitcoin is insurmountable. Like there's nothing on this earth, maybe besides certain jurisdictions that are on the OFAC list, but there's nothing really that you can't, if you do increase due diligence of something, that you can't say, okay, I'm comfortable that we've put enough people and resources on our team to analyze a company like Coinbase and make sure their program's good and proceed that way. I think the problem is that big banks already make a ton of money off what they're doing. And so it doesn't justify them bringing someone like me on and building out this huge, Silvergate has grown so much since 2013, just their crypto practice, having to bring in lawyers and compliance specialists and onboarding vendors like Chainalysis and Elliptic and that sort of thing. Like there's just a lot of overhead to mitigate the perceived money laundering risks. And I say perceived, I'm not saying that it's true increased money laundering or illicit activity or terrorist financing risk. But yeah, I think the 9/11 gave the Patriot Act and the Bank Secrecy Act a lot more teeth than it had before. And a lot of times like regulators and the government can use like tragedies or current events to try to explain why they want to exert more control. We've seen it with COVID. We've seen it in Canada. It's happening current day too. And so, yeah, a lot of times what's pointed to is bank accounts were used to fund 9/11. Crypto could be too. So don't give crypto companies bank accounts. But I think we've seen banks do that very successfully. And I would hope that more are interested in understanding the space.
Okay, so you've set up an initiative. I don't know if I'm categorizing it right, but I know you're working on some stuff. I want to hear about what you're working on in terms of how people can connect with you, sort of what your thoughts are on the space.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I've been, ever since I got into the space, I just couldn't get enough information, and I started attending conferences and meetups in the cities I lived in, and over the last year with COVID, I found people, are moving around a lot more, sort of nomadic. They aren't really based in one specific place. And so I helped launch an organization last November called Crypto Connect. And I'm excited about it because for two reasons. One, it's the entire board is really established professional women in the space. The organization itself host educational pieces and meetups that are open to everyone, completely co-ed and open to everyone. But I felt like there was this sort of constant narrative around cryptocurrency sort of being so male dominated. And there's so many amazing men and women in the space. I wanted to sort of help showcase some of the women I had gotten to know. But we launched in 12 different cities and have started to have quarterly meetups. And all of those meetups have been super well attended. And the idea is that if you're a member of Crypto Connect in general, you can ping into any of these city organizations when you travel for work, if you move, if you're somewhere for a few days for business. And so I think it's going to be a really neat way for new people to continue to come into like the fold of the industry and learn things, but also in sort of this new era of COVID and travel and things like that to continue bolstering the opportunities for in-person meetings and business development, networking, that sort of thing. So it's been really exciting so far. I never thought I'd help sort of found a company. And it's keeping me busy.
How do people find out about it?
So cryptoconnect.org is our URL. We have a member sign up where there's a drop down of the 12 cities that you can be affiliated with. You can choose whatever city's closest to you. We're also adding 6 more cities in the next few months. So we're hoping to continue growing this and have it eventually be an international thing as well, where when people travel internationally, they can ping into the networks. Also, I'm very active on Twitter. I keep sort of my followers updated on regulatory developments, and my handle on Twitter is Hailey Lennon BTC. So, if you're interested in more crypto legal and regulatory news, and I also just try to keep it light and funny sometimes on there. So those are probably the 2 best ways to keep in touch. But yeah, I'm, super excited for people who are interested in
All
the
right,
space.
I'm about to follow you. Can you follow me back?
Yeah, I'll follow you back.
Okay, I just followed you right now. Hailey Lennon, BTC, I see you. I'm easy. It's really complicated. Todd Ault III. I'm Milton Todd Ault III. And I have 2 Twitters, a personal and then my business Twitter, which I just followed you on. I see
Awesome.
you, Anderson Kills Law, Crypto Connect. Oh, nice. I'm going to follow Crypto Connect too.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, so what does it cost any money to join Crypto Connect?
No, so we're a nonprofit, and all of our events are sponsored by cryptocurrency companies in the space. So our events are free. We may eventually start putting out some like webinars and educational things that would have a small fee associated. But for now, it's open to everyone and free. And the goal is just to keep connecting the industry.
So you're going to let BitNile be a sponsor?
I would love that.
Okay, I'm waiting for it right now. You're talking to the chairman right now. I'm the founder.
Awesome.
And we're going to have 20,600 miners installed by September. We were one of 5 companies invited to Dubai to buy Bitmain's new green miner. We're heavily invested in Michigan and our location there. We bought an old copper plant, turned it into a Bitcoin mining facility, a data center. We're pretty excited about the space. I badly want to ask you a question, and I think it's really important. I appreciate your time, Hailey. Really,
of course.
I want to do this again with you. I'd love for you to consider coming to our crypto event with Tom Lee, Michael Saylor, Dr. Frank Albo. If you can make it in May, the Saturday in May, I think it's May 14th.
Okay.
It's in Las Vegas at the Paris Hotel. It's called a Risk On Business Conference. One day is about crypto. I'd love for you to be on that panel. I'd obviously pay your way to get here and whatever your speaking fee is or whatever. We could talk about that.
But well, thank you. I'd love to be involved.
Super excited you're here. Now, I'm going to sign off for a second. Everybody follow her at Crypto Connect. Hailey's Twitter account will be up on the screen. Hailey, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm going to explain to you real quick.
But don't
We're
let
rolling out.
it
There's a reason for it.
So I did get that right. I did get that right. I want to hear the story.